In the mind of 15-year-old Tyler Matthews, he was untouchable, a master of manipulation who could charm his way out of anything, even murder. A delusion that led him to do the unthinkable. Laugh directly at Judge Judy Files during his own murder trial, mocking her authority while the lifeless body of his 16-year-old girlfriend Emma Rodriguez lay cold in the ground. But as Tyler sat in that courtroom, his arrogant smirk spread across his face like he was watching a comedy show instead of facing justice for strangling the girl who loved him. Prosecutors were sitting on a digital bombshell that would obliterate his carefully crafted innocent act. Hidden deep in his phone's deleted files was a recording that no one saw coming. A piece of evidence so chilling and calculated that it would rewrite everything the world thought they knew about teenage love gone wrong. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. This wasn't going to be a trial about a relationship that spiraled out of control, or a moment of teenage rage that went too far. This was about to become a terrifying journey into the mind of a predator who had been planning Emma's death for weeks, documenting every step of his psychological torture, and filming something so disturbing that even seasoned homicide detectives would struggle to watch it. Tyler Matthews believed he was the smartest person in every room, that his boyish face and honor roll grades made him invisible to suspicion. He thought his performance as the devastated boyfriend had fooled everyone, from Emma's grieving parents to the police officers who first questioned him. But what Tyler didn't know was that his own narcissistic need to document his superiority had created a digital trail of evidence that would become the rope used to hang him. The recording hidden in his phone wasn't just proof of premeditation. It was proof of something far more sinister, something that would reveal Tyler Matthews wasn't just a killer. He was a predator who had been studying his victim like a scientist studies a lab rat, mapping out her psychological breaking points, testing her boundaries, and recording her terror for his own twisted entertainment. When this evidence finally surfaced in that courtroom, Tyler's arrogant laughter would die in his throat, and the world would see what Emma Rodriguez had seen in her final moments. Not a boyfriend, but a monster wearing the mask of first love. Before we dive into this disturbing case that will change how you look at teenage relationships forever, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the evidence we're about to reveal will shock you to your core. You won't want to miss how this seemingly innocent honor student's own arrogance becomes the key to his downfall, and how a hidden recording will expose the calculated evil that was lurking behind his perfect student facade. The truth about what Tyler Matthews did to Emma Rodriguez in the weeks before her murder will haunt you. But it's a truth that every parent and teenager needs to hear. The autumn leaves were just beginning to turn gold in the quiet suburban town of Millbrook when Emma Rodriguez first caught Tyler Matthews' attention during their sophomore chemistry class. She was the kind of girl who made everything look effortless. Her dark hair always perfectly styled, her smile genuine and warm as she helped struggling classmates with their assignments. Emma was the daughter every parent dreamed of having, a straight-A student who volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends and still made time to babysit her younger cousins without complaint. Her bedroom walls were covered with acceptance letters from colleges that recognized not just her academic excellence, but her character. She had dreams of becoming a veterinarian, plans that stretched far beyond the boundaries of their small town, and a family that supported every ambitious goal she set for herself. Her parents, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, had immigrated from Mexico when Emma was just 3 years old, working multiple jobs to build the life they wanted for their daughter. They saw Emma as their greatest achievement, a brilliant young woman who represented everything they had sacrificed to accomplish. Every evening, Emma would sit at the kitchen table with her mother, sharing details about her day while helping prepare dinner, their conversations flowing seamlessly between English and Spanish as they laughed about teachers and gossiped about school events. She was the center of her family's universe, the bright star they all orbited around, and her happiness was their happiness. When Tyler Matthews entered Emma's life during their junior year, the Rodriguez family welcomed him with open arms. Tyler was everything a parent could want in their daughter's first serious boyfriend. He was polite and respectful, always addressing Emma's parents as Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez, never forgetting to compliment Maria's cooking or ask Carlos about his work at the construction company. Tyler had the kind of all-American good looks that made mothers trust him instantly, sandy brown hair that looked like he'd just stepped out of a magazine, and a smile that seemed to light up any room he entered. He was a member of the National Honor Society, played varsity soccer, and had already been accepted to 3 different universities with partial scholarships. To everyone watching, Tyler and Emma were the perfect high school couple, the kind of relationship that made adults nostalgic for their own teenage years. They held hands in the hallways, shared lunch together every day, and seemed genuinely happy in each other's company. Tyler would bring Emma flowers for no reason, write her sweet notes that she would show to her friends, and never failed to tell her how beautiful she looked. Their social media accounts were filled with pictures of their adventures together, hiking trips and movie dates, homecoming photos where they looked like they belonged on the cover of a magazine. Teachers would comment on how well-suited they seemed, and other students would joke about how they were destined to get married and live happily ever after. But behind the Instagram posts and public displays of affection, a different dynamic was slowly taking root. It started small, so subtle that Emma herself didn't recognize it as anything sinister. Tyler began asking detailed questions about her daily schedule, wanting to know exactly where she would be and when. He would express concern about her safety, insisting that she text him whenever she arrived somewhere new. At first, Emma found his protectiveness endearing, interpreting his constant contact as evidence of how much he cared about her. When he suggested that maybe she didn't need to spend so much time with her girlfriends, that their relationship was more important than hanging out with people who didn't really understand their connection, Emma saw it as romantic rather than controlling. The changes in Emma were gradual enough that her friends initially attributed them to the normal adjustments that come with being in a serious relationship. She started declining invitations to group activities, explaining that she and Tyler had special plans together. She stopped participating in the casual conversations about other boys that had once been a staple of teenage girl friendships, becoming defensive whenever anyone made even innocent comments about Tyler's behavior. Her best friend Sarah Chen noticed that Emma's phone seemed to be constantly buzzing with messages, and that Emma would immediately stop whatever she was doing to respond, her face taking on an expression of mild panic if Tyler's calls went unanswered for more than a few minutes. Emma's parents began to notice subtle changes too, though they initially dismissed their concerns as the normal growing pains of watching their daughter fall in love for the first time. Emma spent less time at the kitchen table talking with her mother, instead rushing to her room to FaceTime with Tyler. She became irritable when family obligations conflicted with Tyler's plans, something that was completely out of character for the girl who had always prioritized family above everything else. When Carlos suggested that Emma might want to consider applying to colleges that were farther away, giving her more options for her future, Emma became uncharacteristically angry, insisting that she needed to stay close to Tyler, that their relationship was more important than any college program. The most telling sign came during Emma's 17th birthday party, a small gathering that had been planned for weeks. Tyler arrived with an expensive gift, a beautiful necklace that Emma immediately put on, beaming with happiness. But throughout the evening, he monitored her interactions with surgical precision, positioning himself strategically so he could observe every conversation she had. When Emma's cousin Miguel, a college freshman home for the weekend, spent a few minutes catching up with her about her plans for the future, Tyler's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Later that evening, Sarah Chen watched as Tyler pulled Emma aside, his hand gripping her arm just a little too tightly as he whispered something in her ear that made Emma's smile fade, and her eyes fill with what looked suspiciously like tears. The perfect couple facade was beginning to crack, but Tyler Matthews was a master of public performance. He knew exactly how to calibrate his behavior, how to be charming enough in public to maintain his reputation while slowly tightening his psychological grip on Emma in private. He understood that isolation was a gradual process, that if he moved too quickly, Emma's family and friends might intervene. So he played the long game, positioning himself as the loving boyfriend who simply couldn't bear to be apart from his girlfriend, while systematically dismantling every relationship and support system that might threaten his control over her. The breaking point came on a cold, Thursday evening in February when Emma Rodriguez finally found the courage to say the words that would seal her fate. "I think we need to take a break." She had been planning this conversation for weeks, rehearsing the words in her mirror, knowing that Tyler's reaction would be explosive, but finally understanding that her relationship had become a prison she could no longer endure. They were sitting in Tyler's car in the empty parking lot behind the town's old movie theater, a location Tyler had chosen because it was isolated, far from the prying eyes of parents and friends who might witness what he was truly capable of. Emma had prepared herself for tears, for pleading, for the manipulative tactics Tyler had used so many times before to make her feel guilty for wanting independence. What she hadn't prepared for was the cold, calculating rage that transformed Tyler's face into something unrecognizable. His hands, which had once held hers with such tenderness, suddenly became weapons of control. In Tyler's twisted mind, Emma wasn't ending a relationship. She was committing an act of treason against his authority. He had spent months grooming her, molding her into the perfect possession, and now she dared to assert her own will. The violence that followed wasn't passionate or uncontrolled. It was methodical, purposeful and terrifyingly calm. Tyler's hands closed around Emma's throat with the precision of someone who had thought about this moment many times before. As the life drained from her eyes, he felt not remorse but satisfaction, the fulfillment of a power fantasy he had been nurturing for months. Emma Rodriguez, the girl who had once dreamed of saving animals and studying veterinary medicine, died alone in a car with the boy she had trusted with her heart. Her final moments were filled not with the love she thought they shared, but with the horrifying realization that she had never really known Tyler Matthews at all. The cover-up began immediately, revealing the depth of Tyler's calculating nature. He carefully positioned Emma's body in the passenger seat, took her phone, and began crafting a digital deception that would buy him precious time. He sent text messages from Emma's phone to her parents, claiming she was staying overnight at her friend Sarah's house to work on a project. He called Sarah directly using Emma's phone and told her in a perfectly mimicked, distressed voice that she was having family problems and needed space. Tyler understood that he had a narrow window before people started asking questions, and he used that time to dispose of Emma's body in a remote wooded area, 20 miles outside of town. When Tyler arrived at the Rodriguez household the next morning, playing the role of the concerned boyfriend wondering why Emma hadn't returned his calls, his performance was flawless. He sat in the Rodriguez kitchen, accepting Maria's offer of coffee with steady hands, his face a mask of growing worry as the hours passed without word from Emma. He joined the search parties, helped distribute missing person flyers with Emma's picture, and even comforted Maria Rodriguez as she broke down in tears, all while knowing exactly where Emma's body lay, hidden among the winter-bare trees. The discovery came 3 days later when a jogger's dog led police to Emma's makeshift grave. The sight that greeted investigators was heartbreaking. 17-year-old Emma Rodriguez, still wearing the clothes she had died in, her dreams of veterinary school and helping animals buried with her in the cold February ground. The medical examiner's preliminary findings confirmed what the positioning of her body suggested. She had been strangled, the life squeezed out of her by someone with enough strength and determination to maintain pressure until her struggles stopped. Detective Sarah Kim, a 15-year veteran of the county sheriff's department, had worked dozens of homicide cases, but something about this crime scene felt different. The body had been carefully positioned, almost reverently arranged as if the killer wanted Emma to look peaceful in death. It wasn't the hasty disposal of evidence that characterized most crimes of passion. This felt planned, purposeful, and disturbingly personal. The lack of defensive wounds on Emma's hands suggested she had trusted her attacker completely, never seeing the violence coming until it was too late to fight back. When news of Emma's death reached the community, the shock was seismic. This wasn't supposed to happen in Millbrook, where the biggest crimes were usually vandalism at the high school or teenagers caught drinking in the woods. Parents who had watched Emma grow up struggled to comprehend that this bright, beautiful girl who had babysat their children and helped elderly neighbors with their groceries could be the victim of such senseless violence. The grief was compounded by the randomness of it all, the terrifying realization that if this could happen to Emma Rodriguez, it could happen to anyone. Tyler's performance during this period was worthy of an Academy Award. He attended Emma's vigil, tears streaming down his face as he spoke about their plans for the future and how much he loved her. He comforted her devastated parents, promising them that he would do everything in his power to help find whoever had taken their daughter from them. He gave interviews to local news stations, his voice breaking with emotion as he described Emma as his soulmate and begged for anyone with information to come forward. To everyone watching, Tyler Matthews appeared to be a young man destroyed by the loss of his first love, a grieving boyfriend whose pain was so raw it was almost painful to witness. Detective Sarah Kim had seen enough grieving boyfriends to know the difference between real anguish and a performance, and something about Tyler Matthews felt wrong from the very first interview. While Emma's parents were consumed with raw, uncontrollable grief that left them barely able to speak coherently, Tyler's sorrow felt rehearsed, calculated, and strangely self-aware. He cried at all the right moments, said all the right things, but his tears seemed to turn on and off like a faucet, and his eyes held a coldness that didn't match his trembling voice. When Kim asked Tyler to walk her through his last conversation with Emma, his story was too perfect, too detailed, as if he had practiced every word. The investigation took a sharp turn when phone records revealed inconsistencies in Tyler's timeline that he couldn't explain away. Text messages between Tyler and Emma showed an escalating pattern of control and manipulation that painted a very different picture of their relationship than the one Tyler had been selling to everyone. More damning was Emma's final text to her best friend Sarah, sent just hours before her death. "I'm going to break up with Tyler tonight. I'm scared of how he'll react, but I can't live like this anymore." When confronted with this evidence, Tyler's facade began to crack for the first time, his confident demeanor shifting to irritation, rather than the shock and grief that an innocent boyfriend should have displayed. The arrest came on a gray Monday morning, exactly 1 week after Emma's body was discovered. Tyler was sitting in his first period calculus class, maintaining his role as the morning boyfriend, when Detective Kim and her partner entered the classroom. The other students watched in stunned silence as Tyler was handcuffed and read his rights, his face showing not the confusion and fear that an innocent person would feel, but a cold, calculating anger. As he was led through the school hallways in shackles, Tyler's eyes swept over his classmates with contempt rather than shame, as if he was annoyed by their dramatic reactions to what he clearly viewed as an unfortunate misunderstanding. In the interrogation room at the county sheriff's department, Tyler's true personality finally emerged from behind the mask he had worn for so long. Gone was the charming, respectful young man who had fooled Emma's parents and teachers. In his place sat a cold, arrogant teenager who viewed the entire process as an intellectual exercise rather than a matter of life and death. When Detective Kim informed him that they had evidence placing him with Emma on the night she died, Tyler's response wasn't denial or shock. Instead, he leaned back in his chair with a smirk and asked if she thought she was clever for figuring that out. The confession that followed was unlike anything Detective Kim had heard in her 15-year career. Tyler didn't confess out of remorse or guilt, but out of what seemed to be sheer frustration that people weren't appreciating the complexity of his planning. He described Emma's murder with the detached precision of a scientist discussing a laboratory experiment, referring to her not by name but as the subject and the target. He explained how he had been planning her death for weeks, studying her routines, identifying the perfect location, and preparing for every possible contingency. Tyler spoke about strangling Emma as if he were describing solving a difficult math problem, proud of his methodology, and irritated that others couldn't appreciate the elegance of his execution. Most chilling was Tyler's complete inability to understand why anyone was upset about Emma's death. In his mind, she had violated the terms of their relationship by attempting to leave him, and her death was simply the logical consequence of that choice. He spoke about Emma as if she had been his property, something he had invested time and energy in developing, and her decision to break up with him was tantamount to theft. Tyler genuinely seemed to believe that he had been the victim in this situation, that Emma had wronged him by not appreciating the control and attention he had given her. When Detective Kim asked Tyler if he felt any remorse for taking the life of someone who had loved him, his response was a cold, bitter laugh. He told her that Emma hadn't loved him, that she had been ungrateful and selfish, and that her death had actually been a mercy, because she clearly wasn't capable of understanding what real love looked like. Tyler's version of love was ownership, possession, and complete control. And in his twisted worldview, Emma's murder wasn't a crime but a correction, a necessary adjustment to restore the natural order of their relationship. The most disturbing moment of the interrogation came when Tyler began describing the lead-up to Emma's death, the weeks of psychological manipulation and control that had preceded the physical violence. He spoke with pride about how he had isolated her from her friends and family, how he had convinced her that his jealousy and possessiveness were signs of devotion rather than warning signs of danger. Tyler had been conducting a systematic campaign of psychological warfare against Emma, breaking down her self-esteem and independence until she was completely dependent on his approval. The murder wasn't a crime of passion. It was the final move in a game Tyler had been playing for months, and he wanted Detective Kim to understand just how thoroughly he had dominated his victim before he killed her. While Tyler Matthews sat in his jail cell, convinced his performance had been flawless, forensic investigators were digging deep into his digital life, uncovering evidence that would shatter his defense before it even began. Hidden in the deleted files of his smartphone, they discovered Tyler's secret obsession, dozens of recordings he had secretly made of Emma during their relationship, documenting every moment of her psychological breakdown as he systematically destroyed her self-esteem. These weren't innocent couple videos. They were the calculated documentation of a predator studying his prey, complete with Tyler's own voice, providing chilling commentary about Emma's progress under his control. The moment that would define Tyler Matthews' trial came during the prosecution's presentation of the secret recordings. As the jury listened in horror to Tyler's voice coldly analyzing Emma's emotional breakdown while she sobbed in the background, Tyler sat at the defense table with a look of barely contained amusement. When the prosecutor paused the audio to ask if the defense had any objections, Tyler suddenly burst into laughter, pointing at the judge and declaring, "This is better than Judge Judy." His courtroom eruption shattered any remaining illusion of remorse, revealing the monster who found entertainment in his victim's documented suffering and his own legal proceedings. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with a verdict that surprised no one who had witnessed Tyler's courtroom performance. As the foreman read guilty of first-degree murder, Tyler's face transformed from smug confidence to genuine shock for the first time since his arrest. The boy who had believed himself untouchable suddenly realized that his own arrogance had destroyed any chance of mercy. When given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, Tyler made one final attempt to control the narrative, standing up and declaring that Emma had been lucky to have someone who cared enough to teach her lessons about respect. Judge Patricia Henley, a veteran of 30 years on the bench, had heard enough. Her voice cut through the courtroom like a blade as she delivered Tyler's sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. She looked directly at Tyler and said, "You didn't love Emma Rodriguez. You consumed her. You documented her suffering like it was entertainment. And you've shown this court that you are incapable of human empathy." As the reality of spending his life in a concrete cell finally hit him, Tyler's carefully constructed facade crumbled completely. The master manipulator became what he had always been underneath: a terrified child who had finally met consequences he couldn't charm his way out of. The bailiffs had to physically drag Tyler from the courtroom as he screamed that everyone was too stupid to understand his genius, that Emma should have been grateful for his attention. His final words before the doors closed behind him were a desperate shriek: "I made her special. Without me, she was nothing." The Rodriguez family finally had justice, but more importantly, they had the truth. Emma's mother, Maria, stood outside the courthouse and spoke about her daughter not as a victim, but as a beloved girl whose dreams had been stolen by someone who confused possession with love. This case shows us how dangerous controlling behavior can become when unchecked, and how predators often hide behind the mask of romantic devotion. If this video opened your eyes to the warning signs of an abusive relationship, please share it with someone who might need to see it. Subscribe for more deep dives into cases that matter, and remember that love should never feel like ownership. What other cases would you like me to cover? Let me know in the comments below, and never forget that Emma Rodriguez deserved so much better than the monster who stole her future.